Radio 2000, our music, your memories. Thank you so much for choosing to wake up with us. We're driving you to school. We're taking you to work. It's DJ Sbu, Natin Damase, and Lelo Mzata. We're very excited to be with you guys. We're just counting a few weeks down to the 2024 South African elections. And we're ready. We're very excited. We're going to vote. We've got 3 ballots that we're talking about these elections. And Lelo is here. I don't know. You said to me you're voting, but you don't want to tell me who you're voting for. Who are you voting for?
I don't want to tell you who I'm voting for, Sbu. You know they say my vote is my secret, and that is that. I'm going to keep it that way. So don't read anything into the way I'm dressed today. Because, yes, I'm in camo pants, but it's just pants, okay? It's not an indication of which political party I'm going with. But my vote is my secret.
His vote is his secret as your vote as well. It is your secret. You choose. Just shut up about it. You don't have to tell anybody. But you have to vote. We are all voting. I'm still not impressed. We're just a few weeks away, and I still have to have political parties come and impress me with my vote, because my vote is expensive. I'm not just going to give it to anyone. And today I'm very excited because we're sitting with an entrepreneur, business person who's also spent most of their lives as an activist. And at some point she was in politics, and it's an interesting conversation we're going to have today about the 2024 South African elections. We welcome Sis Mandisa Mashego. Welcome to the show, ma'am.
Oh, thank you so much, Sbu, as usual. Put Sbu, so you know I always call you Puti, even though I can call you Sbu, because
Yes,
you're younger
ma'am.
than me. I must be ageist.
Yes, ma'am.
Ngiyabonga kakhulu. Thanks for the invite.
And thank you for joining us. I think the first thing I'd like to say for our listeners who probably have been living under a rock who don't know Sis Mandisa Mashego Bani, just a little summary.
What should I say? Ngicale ngama qualifications. I'm a 50-year-old single, never married mother of one 30-year-old adult.
Who's
I
traveled
think
the world, right?
that summarizes it.
Yeah.
Look, I've done quite a lot of stuff. I've had 3 careers, many jobs, 3 careers, 1 in politics. My main career has been in public relations and brand communications. I did that for about 20 years. A few academic qualifications, of course, to justify my corporate career, because, you know, if you want to climb up the ladder and you're a female, you not only need to be competent, capable, but you also need to have a lot of qualifications, most of which are not really very necessary. Experience can teach you most of the stuff you need to learn in the business world and in the working world. Mm-hmm. But yes, I come from a family that's relatively close-knit as well. I know that it's not necessary to highlight the fact that I've never been married, but I highlight it because we live in a society that is so programmed around how women should live their lives. You know, their marital status becomes a determining factor even for careers, you know. Mm. I mean, there's a lot of careers where if you're not married as a woman, you're not going to get the CEO position. You're not going to get the top job because you need to be married. Men might argue the same argument, but I think for women the pressure is a lot greater. But nonetheless, I've very stubbornly remained so, and I've enjoyed my life. I mean, as an activist, I'm an activist, and I'm proud to be called an activist, mainly in the economic space. Of course, we call it political activism because when you're trying to fix society, you have to do it through politics. Whether you're in a political party, you don't have to be a member of a political party or any, association or body of any kind in order to actually be an activist in the political space, because all of us are engaged in the political space, whether we like it or not. As you've just said, you have to vote as a citizen. It's not compulsory in South Africa like it is in, say, New Zealand or Australia, for instance. There are many countries that make voting compulsory, because remember, it's compulsory for you to pay taxes. If you don't pay tax, you can actually literally be jailed, right? So if you're forced to pay taxes, you might as well, because your money is going to be used by these individuals that you're voting for. So you really should, I believe that voting should be made compulsory. What you do when you're in the ballot area, in the voting station, and you've got your ballot in front of you, Lelo, that's a different story. You have a right to scratch out that ballot.
Yeah.
But that is also voting, because it has to be counted.
Yeah, it's a spoiled ballot.
It's a spoiled ballot,
There's something quite interesting that you're actually talking about, the fact that you say that, look, you are a 50-year-old unmarried woman, mother of 1. And now that's quite important to actually highlight, because in society, there's this whole thing that a woman is supposed to be this, and a woman is supposed to look like that, and a woman is supposed to have this, and a woman is supposed to behave like that. Whereas, there's more than just one type of woman. I'll give an example. I've got a friend, she's a lady, and she's got a full-on beard, right? And she keeps that beard. proudly so, because also is to highlight that not all women are beardless. There are women out there who actually do have beards, and there shouldn't be the stereotype to say, if you're a woman, then this, that, and the other. It's like she can still be a woman, and she's showing
Is she
that.
like a transgender person?
No, she's not. She is actually born female, and she does have a beard.
Yeah, because
But-
of hormonal changes.
Yes,
Yeah.
because of that or any other reason. But the thing is, it also highlights that she, there's more than one kind of woman that society say that a woman should look like this and be like this. And if the person is not like that, then that is not
And,
a
and,
woman.
and where are those rules for men?
You see, now that's another thing that I
So,
want to
so
know.
this is the problem with that, and the reason I highlighted it on purpose is because even if you don't highlight it, society highlights it for you.
Yes.
Society makes it a point to remind women that you are not married, you've never been married, and you know what that means? It basically means you're not, you haven't been controlled by a man. When they say, "Oh, you're not married," and they keep highlighting it, what they really mean is like, "Oh, okay, so we're dealing with you, this special kind of woman, ongakontroleki, ongakwazi ukuthatha umthetho wendoda."
Ongakwazi
Because it's
ukuthoba.
not ongakwazi ukuzithoba, because what's your problem? Why didn't you marry? Why aren't you married? It's not like you have a looks problem or you come from a background that didn't allow you to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you have some other valid excuse why ungashadanga. So I always put it, front and center, because it's a very political engagement for us as women. Never mind the fact that in South Africa in particular, majority women, let's say majority black women, and when I say black, I mean African black, because this doesn't apply to colored women, doesn't apply to Indian women, it definitely doesn't apply to white women. It's the majority of us who are actually not married.
Wow.
And I'm not meaning, and I always emphasize never married. It's like Maugcwali summer forms, but he's single, what. There's politics in that nonsense of single, because they put single, married, divorced, widowed. Remember?
Yeah.
So I always scratch out all of them, never married. You need to put it there. Because when they put the divorced and single, it doesn't actually make sense, because the minute you put single, they're basically trying to, you need to specify. Oh, you're not divorced, you're not widowed. So what are you? Some people try to be progressive, and I think I don't know if it's a relevant progressiveness. Then they put the living, I don't know how they define
Living
abantu
partner.
abahlala nabantu besilisa. I've never done that either. Wow.
But if I then said,
Angaze
ukipita.
ngakipita.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe in ukukipita.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
I'm anti ukukipita for many reasons. As a female, not for men. I think there are benefits of ukukipita for amadota, but for a woman, I think it's a bit of a different dynamic. There's a lot involved in it, but yeah. Those are the politics of whether you're single, married, never married. So I just feel like, and sometimes when you must put never married. We exist, we're a breed. But the point I was raising is that majority black women now are actually unmarried. Whether but divorcee, they are widowed, or like myself, have never ever been, married. That is a reality. And how society then defines itself through the lens of a woman, or the eyes of a woman, or the image of a woman, needs to very urgently be relooked at. The societal values, because sibakhulisile abantwana. Most of us, our mothers raised us, abo baba bethu bengekho, even though they were married.
Yeah.
Abantwana abakhula esithenjini can attest to this, that they are raised primarily by their mothers. Because you literally can only be with one family at a time.
You got only 24 hours a day like everybody else.
Even if you all live in the same compound, for
Yes.
instance, right? So the guy can run around all day long to try and attend to problems and attend to family issues. But at the end of the day, you may spend iskati with one family, children and wife at a certain time. So for me, the politics of single, married, and all of that, and how we are defined, and how it secretly gets used against us.
Yes.
Secretly, it's used against us. You're sitting in an interview for a job, or you're pitching or something. Everybody's sitting there wondering if ushadile, because they're just not. You're an uncontrollable woman. Already, I am very difficult to control, of course, because I try to inform myself, equip myself, educate myself, keep myself empowered as much as I possibly can, so that when I have to make a decision, I make decisions that are as informed as possible. But for some reason, in our society, that is just, defined as our laulegi, our controlegi. You're just, you're just this woman who's loose cannon, and it's all about the man and how comfortable do you make a man. So your marital status tells society that, oh no, mina ngiyakwazi ukuhlala nomuntu wesilisa, ngiyacontroleka, men shouldn't be nervous around me. Whatever a man wants, I'm ready and willing. And I know this sounds like I'm bashing married people. I'm not.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends, if not all my friends, are married. And I normally make very good friends with both husband and wife if I have a friend who's married. And I actually love the institution of marriage. I literally love it. I just think, for myself, I took a different decision, and I realized, I think before I get married, I need to spend a lot of time with me, raise my child, sort myself out, make sure that the day in Shada, one, I'm much older, versus getting married younger, because I would never have been comfortable being married young. I would have been divorced 100 times if I did get married when I was young, because the Mandisa of 20 years, 30 years ago to the Mandisa today even has a completely different perspective of men than what I had when I was young, completely different perspective of marriage, completely different perspective of society. So Naganjani, I would have married somebody that would have been a mismatch, that I would have been a mismatch to. And the marriage obviously wouldn't even have lasted. Being the romantic that I am, I think marriages should last forever if they can afford to last forever. But it's very rare that you get them that they last forever, because, we get married for reasons that have nothing to do really with marriage.
But isn't that what life is all about? Learning, divorcing, if you don't like, you move on, you meet other people. There's nothing wrong about also having,
Being
divorced a
divorced.
couple of times.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. I mean, I'm not anti-divorce either. There's nothing absolutely wrong with divorce, but I'm a perfectionist. I'm not getting married to get divorced. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you. All right, let's get into this one. I once had a conversation with you, and we spoke about womanism and feminism. What's
Yeah.
the difference, and why do you call yourself a womanist?
I'm a womanist because, one, I'm a woman. Two, I'm African and black, right? I'm largely African and black. And that's the core of womanism in terms of not its goal, its objectives, but it's when you define a womanist. So you can be a womanist as a man. You can also be a womanist if you happen to be a white man or a white woman or Chinese or whatever nationality or race group you represent. The difference with feminism, though, is that feminism looks at the issues that affect women in the context of the growth and development of capitalism. We must always locate these discussions around, there must be a context that we set. And the context around it is imperialism, capitalism, right? Of course, stemming as a result of colonialism.
Colonialism, yeah.
And in today's current epoch, it's the coloniality. So like colonialism is gone as a system on paper, but we still live in a colonized sort of setting, right? And so the coloniality and the imperialism and capitalism of the entire globe, really, it's not just the countries that were colonized, then gave birth to the necessity for human beings, specifically women, to start fighting, and putting up concerted struggles for, on all fronts, from every different aspect of society, including the homes and private family settings, because of, we all now know what colonialism was about, etc. But primarily because over and above stripping all of us as black people, as Africans in Africa, of our land rights, right, and our economic rights, because really colonialism is about the economy. The politics of it is just a distraction. It's a means to an end. The end of colonialism was not about political rights or politics. It was about economic domination. So I remove you from where you stay. I take you away from your entire methodology of living. I take you away from how you heal yourself when you're sick. I take you away from how you feed yourself, how you make clothes for yourself, how you build houses for yourself, how you protect yourself from dangerous elements of nature, etc., etc. And then I take over your entire life in order not necessarily to control you. I control you because what I want are the resources that you are sitting on top of. And now I have to control you because now, does that sound familiar? Does that sound like a lot
Very.
relationships even. So,
It does.
so womanism is the struggle out of coloniality towards a greater form of freedoms, which is what we're all fighting. We're all fighting ultimately to be free, but without the context of the broader global setting. Meaning, in a simplified way, I could relate, a black person in South America can relate to me and I can relate to them because we're both black. And if we both happen to be women, we can relate to each other almost as though we grew up together. It becomes so uncanny. It's like we've known each other because the formula that was used for colonialism was the same. However, a white woman who would have been primarily a beneficiary of colonialism along with white men would not relate to my struggles as a woman exactly the same way. They can empathize. So, sometimes people get triggered and say, oh, we can relate. We're white people, we can relate. No, that's fine. We understand. You can empathize. You can relate to some of the experiences, of course, because this does not mean that white women throughout the colonial, domination era were not stripped of their rights or their freedoms. They were, but not to the same extent, and largely also because they are also beneficiaries of colonial, rewards, right? They are beneficiaries. They are beneficiaries privately in their families. If somebody passes on and wants to leave them, all their assets in their will, they become a beneficiary. They became a societal beneficiary from social settings. In South Africa in particular, you had to call a white person madam, a white female madam, and a white man boss. Therefore, they are beneficiaries,
Yes.
right? They are beneficiaries economically. Yes, of course, at some point economically, they were not direct beneficiaries because there were those laws that barred women from working. Once the capitalist and agents started creating companies and businesses and formal ways of work, and we moved away from our indigenous ways of work, those benefits were also kept away from white women. They also had to fight their way through. I mean, I know there are women like Marie Curie, etc., who invented, what was it, was she with herself and her husband, what was their great invention in science? They were there, they were working, but she could not, for instance, if a woman invented something, let's say 100, 200 years ago, that invention had to be put on a man's name, a white man's name. So all of those things went. So we're not suggesting that there was nothing for white women to fight over. In fact, the greatest feminist struggles were waged by white women. The greatest feminist struggles in our contemporary era, I'm not talking hundreds of years ago, when the queens in Africa were leading most of the successful fights against the colonial onslaught, against, the slave trade movement, etc. But white women in the contemporary period, if you look at like the last 100 years, the greatest fights, some of the greatest achievements in modern day systems of governance, in the capitalist way of living, where you have the courts, you have the political system, you have the courts, the security system, you have the church and all of that. White women put up a great fight. And that is the feminist struggle that we must never ever take away, some of the achievements that they made. Because without those achievements also we wouldn't be here. It was largely the white-led feminist movement that led to women enjoying today equal rights and equal opportunity for work. And for women to be able to break barriers and break all forms of blockages that were put in their way to say, oh no, you can't be an engineer, you can't be a lawyer, you can't be a manager, So when some of those fights, I know in the early 60s or late 50s, when some of those battles, were won in the Western world, but led primarily by white feminist activists, they basically saw such privileges, and at the time it was a privilege as a woman being allowed to work in an office environment, but only as a secretary. They then had to carry on, and then women could work as nurses. Then women could work as teachers, right? Teaching and nursing was almost always there because it's kind of like a nurturing. So women must always be in the nurturing, if you're cleaning, obviously people always misinterpret this when I give them this explanation. In the enslavement environment, a woman is obviously going to work, because she's a slave, right? But I'm talking remunerated work, financially compensated work. And so a black woman, an African woman, will then follow suit and follow on the footsteps of your Jermaine Greers as well as your Winnie Mandelas. So a black woman then has the burden of fighting on many fronts for herself and future generations of girls, right, and women, because we don't have an inheritance, right? Black men don't have an inheritance either, right? So we're not creating an unnecessary exceptionalism. What we are saying as a womanist is that when white women fight, they fight the system from this point of view. They know the enemy is clearly defined. With us, the enemy is multifaceted. We also have to fight concertedly black men. And this can be taken as a and I know most men sometimes when they hear people like myself, I think I'm the only person who's constantly talking about this. When they hear me talk about these things, they become very defensive, very angry, very hateful, and like, oh no, we all suffer. Yes, of course, we were all colonized together. The land was taken from all of us. Our mineral and natural resources have been taken from all of us, etc., right? And we are all rebuilding together. But bear in mind that while we are rebuilding in the present day, men are already a step ahead. And there's evidence, there's a lot of evidence to demonstrate this, whether it's in the income inequality gap, whether it's in the I normally like to call it the monopoly on violence.
Yeah, because the black woman is at the very bottom of the barrel. Right?
Of the food chain, as they would say.
And then it'll be the black man.
And
Before everybody else.
So black people are right at the bottom. But
Yeah.
if you're looking at, let's say, the Western environment of, the business environment, and you look at incomes and income differences, the blacks are right at the bottom, but the black woman is not at the bottom together with the black man.
not at all.
And so this fight is more, it's not really a fight per se. It's really like an education process. I like to see it as an education process, because once we all learn as black people to start being a lot more united, and I know it sounds like a song and dance type of thing to say, but once we all start being more cohesive, maybe that's a better word, once we start coordinating our efforts economically, and then start confronting our problems to say without the victimhood, even for us as women, and say, look, let's all just agree. Let's put the victimhood aside. Why? Because we know why we were victims for a very long time. It's a given. We live our victimhood every day. But let's put it aside and start discussing how we're going to try and leave the world a better place than what we found it when we were born. Let's start dealing with the differences that happen, that exist between us as men and women, as black men and black women, and then try and find solutions and find ways of working through that and coming out better people.
Now, how does that differ from feminism?
That differs from feminism because it's a race issue, really. On the white side, white women, like I said, can be womanists because they empathize and they can relate to our struggle. But they are okay just defining themselves as feminists because they do not have that added burden of now fighting for their space in society as women on a racial level. So we have it, one, as a woman, and then two, as a black woman, where we have added fights that we now need to, they might be economic and also cultural. And the economic one, we're always happier to fight, to talk about the economic disparities. Why? Because who's the enemy in our mind when we say economy? And that's wrong, right? We make the enemy a racial enemy. We say it's white people,
Yes.
or even white men. Whereas when you look at the cultural struggles, right, beyond the economic, the cultural, the social cultural struggles of black women, that's where a lot of the deeper problems exist. What we were talking about earlier about Tina Bantu Abamnyama, if you've never been married as a woman,
You get viewed in a
you have
certain
to
way.
be looked at in a certain way. You have
Yeah.
to be seen as somebody who can't take care of themselves or who's not attractive enough for another man, who doesn't have value. Because if indoda ikshadanga, okay, never mind the fact that, you obviously in the process of growing up, you turn down a lot of marriage proposals because you've taken a decision not to be married until a certain point in your life. That doesn't really matter to them. You get viewed as, you're not valuable enough. And so black women have the economic question to consider, but mostly within our communities, we have the cultural question. And then I can take it even deeper than that and say we have a cultural question on the basis of women to women, dynamics. Because oppression of, when you're oppressed as a group, as a population group, you are going to suffer certain maybe psychosocial or psychological disorders as a result of that systemic oppression. One of them is low self-esteem. One is that you develop low self-esteem. If somebody else has come and taken over your entire life over hundreds of years and they are now in charge of your livelihood and you can't get a job unless you get it from a big corporation whose shareholders are primarily white, etc., etc. As a grouping, as a population, you're going to have low self-esteem. We generally do have self-esteem issues as black people, but I think that as black women, our self-esteem issues become a lot more heightened because of these added oppressions that we've had to have, such as mungashadanga, umungatholanga umntwana, umungayenzanga ukuthi, all these burdens that are placed on us really unfairly on the basis of cultural and sometimes even spiritual beliefs that people hold very, very strongly and dearly without challenging themselves. Is this belief that I'm holding actually rational? Does it even still apply to today as it did in 1970, 1940, 1920, 1820? Does it even still apply? Why am I holding this view about women? So I'm saying that on the womanist struggle, we've got these planes. We've got the economic plane. We've got the cultural plane. But then we also have the intra-gender struggle as women. We carry the burden to uplift other women as women. Underpaid as we are, underrepresented as we are in economic spaces, and pushed out. It's not just about representation, because I'm not really a fan of representation, because representation often challenges meritocracy. There's a very thin, people put this thin line between meritocracy and representation. So if I'm representing women, then I don't have to be meritly sort of qualified for whatever it is. I have a problem with that. I prioritize merit before representation. I have a very big problem electorally. I'm part of that fight against electoral, representative politics, because that's what brought us here to say, no, Uzbanban is representing this group, like, in BEE. So, like the joke that we normally tell with no, bazodla on our behalf. Don't worry, you're all hungry, but all your economic benefits are sitting with your BEE beneficiaries, who are literally individuals, who are not representing a bigger beneficiation pool of people. And so, yeah, we as women have these added burdens of helping ourselves, raising our children, helping our families to raise their children with these minuscule resources.
How do you feel in these current elections that I've seen a political party called Sarah with a female leader, but every other political party, all the way to about 52 of them that are on the ballot paper this year, 3 ballots, there's no woman leadership?
No, there are, Sbu. There are. I mean, there's the likes of Women Forward, Females Forward, Women Forward, and there's also there was the KISS Party was there as well. And
is the KISS Party back?
With the KISS Party, I'm not sure if they're back, because I mean there's so many political parties, but there are a number of parties and also even independents
candidates.
Candidates.
Oh, I've seen this Anele.
Yes.
Anele, I've seen Anele.
Yeah.
Yes, Anele Mda is an independent.
Anele Mda is an independent, and big up to her.
Yes.
For being an independent.
I wasn't aware that there was a female, but I know she's definitely a female.
Yeah, I've seen it, but there are a few.
There are a few, no, definitely. There are a few.
So this is why I was saying the representation thing, Lelo. The minute you say, like you were raising a very valid issue, right? And then Lelo says, and I'm not shaming you for that, Lelo. I'm just telling you how society, in my understanding, from my observation, my experience in society, the minute you raise a very valid problem and issue, the representation thing comes up as a defense. So what Lelo was saying, he's not aware of it, but it's these unconscious biases that we end up having in society, where somebody says, oh, but we don't have enough women in that space, to contest. No. But you were raising one female, and then Lilo was saying, no, there's so and so, there's so and so, and there's so and so. And that's fine. That's actually good that you did that, because it highlights exactly the problem. So once I have a representative, then everybody can relax,
Everyone
because
must sit back.
bakhona abafazi abawu 5, but ayingakho amadoda 400,
No nyaguzo.
right?
Nyaguzo.
When in actual fact, on the voters roll, the majority voters are women. Always on the voters roll. And then you go further. You look at what the IEC refers to as turnout. The people who come up and vote and go in, get a ballot and put it in the ballot box. That's turnout versus registered. Yeah? Turnout. Then the disparity increases even more. More women
Go and vote.
vote
Yes. t
than men. Right? What does that tell you? If you look at the societal imbalances that we are struggling with, what does it tell you? I'll tell you in a very crass way. Whenever there's a responsibility that has to be taken seriously, such as raising children, cleaning in the house, making sure there's food and the food is healthy,
Making sure they go to school.
Whenever ama-funerals, imingcwabo, kungcwatshwa umuntu, kuzala umntwana, all the hardships of life that require physical effort, to make sure that things are done and people are safe, people are fed, people are taken care of. Who shows up?
It's the women.
The person who is the most violated. On the constructive side, the person with the least resources. Women must raise children. Even if she's a domestic worker and she's earning 3,000 rand a month, she's got 3 kids, she better make sure those kids are fed and they get some kind of knowledge, education, skills. And the husband, what's his job? Literally just to go to work. There's less burden on men to solve societal problems, which are primarily a manifestation of the actions of men. Let's be honest about it, whether those men are white or black or whatever. And this is not a male bashing exercise. Politics is about solving the society's problems. And society's problems, if not all of them, are sitting on our shoulders. They are not created by us. Okay, let's look at Palestine. Let's look at Palestine, look at Ukraine, and all the other 21 or 24 regions in Africa that are currently in conflict. Perpetual, never-ending conflict. War-torn environments. After all the bombings and the killings and the rape, etc., etc., yes, of course, both men and women must come together to make sure society is fixed and where children are existing in a functional space. But I can bet you now, my last rand, that if you go to Palestine now, you'll find mostly the women up on their feet trying to make sure that this horrendous calamity that has just befallen their nation, they start to make sense of it and start to try and recover from it.
To navigate those waters.
And that is the crux of what I'm saying, right? So you're sitting in boardrooms, you're sitting in meetings, you're deal making, you're doing all these things. It's men all the way. I can give you an example with myself in my business. I'm always the only female in those meetings, and I'm an entrepreneur. I'm on my own. I'm hustling it out on my own. So I can't be accused of young because I'm hogging positions and not wanting to promote women. No, there's nothing to promote anybody to. It's my business. It's my deals that I'm pushing, and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm saying when I go into settings, right now I'm the only female. Almost all the spaces I go to, I'm almost always the only female.
Sis Nati was not feeling well. She was actually meant to join us.
on the show. Yes.
Shout out to Sis Nati in the
Hello, Sis Nati.
It would have been beautiful.
No, it would have been.
It would have been, definitely.
Especially this conversation around,
The politics of our situation as
Yes,
women in
ma'am.
the world, yeah.
Let me ask this question. When it comes to a lack of cohesion amongst black people and also amongst the black men and black women, is it natural or is it engineered, and is it continue being evolved if it is engineered?
I think that by default it could have been engineered, and most likely was engineered, but engineered against black people as a whole, not
Yes.
necessarily to divide us. The the effects of it, maybe intended consequences of it or unintended consequences of it, is that obviously now we have these gender tensions, of course, as a result of a whole lot of maybe cultural values or other things that you can measure that came as a result, that changed and basically were turned on their back as a result of the hundreds of years of dysfunction of the colonial era, yeah? But even if it was deliberately engineered, because I really do not. The victimhood thing, for me, is a taboo, and it will do nothing but take us backwards. Mm-hmm. And it already, there's a lot of indications that, for instance, if you look at South Africa over the last 30 years, that, we've gone backwards in many other, if you look at different indicators, yeah, we've actually regressed. And so, and that's largely as a result of the victimhood card that we play on different levels, whether it's economically, in our social spaces. The reality is that, Lelo, we're going to have to fix this country ourselves. Asithi mhlambe ushadile kamnandi and then wahamba wayocheata on your wife, right? Mm-hmm. And then you and your wife decide, okay, you want to get over it and come back together and fix. Who's going to have to fix the problem? Both of you will have to fix it, even if you caused it. Yes. I'm giving you a very simple example, and I'm not saying you're cheating on your wife, by the way.
Please.
I don't even know you, and I don't know your wife. Like Sihlangana for the first time today.
Angshadile, but that's
okay, or your girlfriend, whatever. Yeah, but you get the point. I was trying to make a simple example that everyone can relate to. Uguti, when a problem occurs, doesn't matter who caused it. The result yenkinga must be fixed. So as black people and at black communities, we need to urgently come together and resolve our biggest problems economically and socially, right? Because constantly waiting for somebody, and this is where women always find themselves. We have, that's why it's always easy. That's why women, whenever there's a solution needed, there's a problem in society, women are always the first to come, because we have learned it through our gender that we are born into, that it doesn't matter what happened, whether there's a war or ushade nomuntu abusayo physically, financially, sexually, whatever, or you stuck with the Diddy type character, right? Masa idlulile yonke leyo drama. When the war is over, you're going to have to create a home again. You have to find a way. So we as black people have to find the solutions. And our political environment, unfortunately, does not lend itself. It doesn't give that opportunity. It's not designed to create an environment where society and communities can come together and collectively find solutions. Yeah, it will never be perfect. There'll always be unhappy people at any given point. But as long as there's that forward collective sort of almost coordinated forward progression without compromising our individual freedoms.
But how do we come together when there's just even more and more political parties with every election that comes along?
That's the biggest problem, right? So the representation thing that I personally have a problem with is what has created this. So proportional representation, even worse. And it's not proportional representation, it's proportional party representation. So often when people hear the phrases proportional representation, they're thinking gender, race, we're going to be proportionally represented. Yes, of course. I think if you have to give credit to the ANC, they did, impose the 50-50 principle for representation in terms of gender. In Parliament, they didn't do it for race, which is quite strange, because South Africa is now slowly but gradually moving back to its racial classification. Things like Selamandia, ukuthi baqale futhi babe namaphathi wabo. But black people have their parties, white people have their parties, colored people now have their parties. I think amaphathi wamandia azobuya. Because when you don't solve your problems, when you don't take the bull by the horns and deal with the difficult stuff, your old problem just simply comes back, right? It's like when you're an addict. It's like we're a country that's addicted. So that's why I have a problem with representation, because I don't think that our system, the political system that we have adopted, well, let me not say we, because it was adopted on our behalf by our representatives. Let me put it that way. That's a better way of saying it. It actually has caused more problems, considering where we were coming from and where we're trying to go, right? Because we still needed to go through this transitionary period before we can get to whatever dream we sort of wanted to manifest as a country. And so for me, society will only start to solve its problems again in South Africa, and we have to be very honest and realistic about this, once we deal with the Electoral Act. And a lot of people who are, let me use a nicer word and say naive, will have a violent reaction to what I'm saying. All our problems will not be solved by the Electoral Act. That's the first thing they tell you, especially the narcissistic respondents that you get representing political parties. Why? Because they obviously don't want to disrupt whatever formula they've got going on there that's working for them. But guess what? It's not working for society. And anybody who tells you that it's working for society is lying, because there's real evidence that it's not working. Poverty has grown, inequality has grown. The more people register to vote, the fewer, the more the percentage of people who actually turn up to vote drops. It has been dropping consistently since the 1999 or 2004 election. Like literally that has been the algorithm. You can follow it. More people register to vote, which is very strange. But on the day of voting, even a lower percentage shows up to vote than the last time. So that's evidence. That's one of the signs that there's a big problem. So if the Electoral Act is not urgently addressed correctly, because we, when the New Nation movement won the case in 2020, I was very excited and many people were excited. We thought it was an opportunity. But guess what? We have a society that doesn't engage with legal documents. They don't have to either, because society we've engineered our society in a programmatic way. Wait for somebody to come and tell you, go to class, sit down, the teacher will come. Go to the hospital, fill in a form, join a queue. Wait for the MPs or a minister to come and decode the law. Actually, here's the law for you. Even the Electoral Act, South Africans were not part of designing during the CODESA negotiations, which was also another mistake, because they should have been, to prepare them for 94.
Does that not also speak to maybe our education system in South Africa?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, all these, let's take government because we're talking elections, right? Let's take government.
Yeah.
Government is structured in such a way, and in South Africa, I don't know, it's a curse actually at the moment, because it's costing us a lot of money, has got a lot of government departments and therefore many ministries, which is obviously a problem. But let's take the Department of Health, for argument's sake. Right? A department that we all should be engaging with, or education. At some point, up to a certain age, you are engaged with the Department of Education, or Home Affairs, all the departments that touch all of us at one point or the other, Department of Transport. The Department of Health should be so efficient that it should be picking up problems for the rest of society. Right? If it's operating intelligently. Because let's take, for instance, a child burns and the child goes to hospital for the burn. When the doctors are attending to the child, they get to understand how the child got to burn, whether the child was alone or there was somebody there, whatever. Yeah. There's a lot of information related to this child's wound that tells you a lot about the child's situation. So automatically you would assume that a social worker or somebody like that will kick in, a police officer will kick in, a teacher will kick in, just from that hospital visit. But you don't have that. The more money we spend as South Africans, our taxes, paying salaries. By the way, over 60% of your money goes to salaries in government. And how competent are government employees? I mean, if you're running a company and you're spending 60% of your money on salaries, you better have the best employees on earth. You know what I mean? They better be able to work on autopilot without you there. They better be able to run that company so well that you just no longer need to be there, supervising it operationally. But we have, the more government departments we've created, and we have, since 1994, the only thing that government has done was create more and more government departments, more and more municipalities. We've never had this many municipalities in South Africa, but the land mass hasn't increased, but we've got more municipalities. And the higher the salary bill, the lower the quality of services. Aren't employees the ones who are supposed to make sure the business is operating efficiently and work is being done? The lower the quality of services, the less and less, or the more silos, let me put it that way, the more silos government has. So in the Department of Health, you go there for this condition, a child goes there, as I've tried to sort of demonstrate as an example. There's no interconnectedness. which you sitting there thinking there should be in this day and age of technology, right? The same way you ask yourself, why are we still struggling with basic infrastructure? Why are we struggling with roads? Why are we struggling with electricity? Why are we struggling with water? Why are we struggling with, having more flushing toilets or whatever technological system you prefer?
Sanitation.
Right? In an era when technology in every sector, specifically in construction and engineering, is so vibrant, is so dynamic. The more technology has progressed, the faster the speed of productivity, of being able to do stuff, the slower development happened in South Africa. I'm lucky because my dad used to work for one of the big engineering firms of the world called Babcock. I don't know if it's still the biggest. In the electricity generation space, I know they were. And he worked there for almost close to 50 years. You could do that back then, yeah? And I can tell you the rate at which, my dad used to tell us this all the time, the rate at which power stations were built. I think they started building power stations in South Africa when? Was it the early 1900s or 1940s, 1930s? The rate of building the power stations that you have, the coal power stations, and then there's a nuclear one in the Western Cape. And I keep hearing one political party some former president trying to talk about nuclear, how he made nuclear fashionable. I was like, no, there's Coburg. Nuclear was actually, invested into very aggressively by the National Party government, yeah? And obviously the British to some extent as well, because they were governing other parts of South Africa. But all those power stations, the one nuclear power station and all the coal-powered power stations that we have, were built at a time when technology was nowhere. I don't know if there was even a television yet. Yeah, I don't think there was a TV, because our power stations, I think, were built around the same time as the ones in the US, because the technology is similar.
Apart from the current new one, right?
There's a couple that they've built
the new
now.
ones, yeah, a few new ones,
I can't remember the name. The one where they just basically looted almost as much as they could. Well, that's what happens with all other projects. But the point I'm making is that technology gives you opportunity for speed and efficiency and productivity. Technology gives you an opportunity to be able to pick up faults from a previous system, etc., etc. Basically, it gives you improvement. It cannot give you anything else but improvement, because it's based on peer review, which is a scientific formula of how you change, knowledge and outcomes, etc., and theories and all of that. So we're sitting with these technologies that give you the capability. Dubai is an example, right, of what I'm talking about.
Yes.
That demonstrate, and it's not just Dubai, South Korea. South Korea is probably, or Indonesia, right? Malaysia, South Korea, Indonesia, Japan.
I mean, from being flattened by nuclear bombs.
Russia.
Look at where they are.
Russia. How many wars have they been engaged in? Yeah. And whenever they have to come, whenever they have to rebuild after the calamity of the war, they rebuild faster
And
better, with better economic outcomes, and let's even be more specific, better beneficiation, which means roll out, trickle down effect of those economic outcomes, where the citizens can attest for it, where all you need to do is to ask people, so how do you feel about your government? Do you feel like there's services? What the hell? There's nothing to feel. I'm not feeling anything. I just want people to do things with my money that they are supposed to be doing. That's it. And not do the stuff that they're doing that they're not supposed to be doing with my money, because it's my money. It's not their money. It's our money, right? It's societal budgets, right? And so you have every indication that you have silos that are growing in your governments, in your government departments in South Africa. You have silos that are not only growing, they're not communicating with each other. And they're becoming even more and more and more toxic in that regard. They do not want to communicate with each other. You have a government that is so incompetent and so incapable in an era when there's artificial intelligence, robotics technology, which I don't agree with all of it, but some of it is great. South Africa's private sector, by the way, has got many, many, many achievements, global achievements. If you take, I think, and I always promise to check this out, but I'm pretty sure I read we were the first country to introduce the ATM.
I've heard that.
No, we are.
I've heard that.
F&B.
In school in business economics, I think I was in grade 10.
Under
yes.
Barclays.
Yes.
When it was Barclays Bank, and then with the sanctions, Barclays went back to wherever they disinvested, and then FNB took over. That's why it used to be called, and I'm not giving them free advertising, sorry, but it used to be called the Bob ATM. So this is historical information. If it's advertising, unfortunately, you can't hide history, behind saying I don't want to give so and so advertising. It was called the Bob ATM because the guy, the inventor, the technologist, the scientist or computer programmer, whatever he was, who designed the ATM, his name was Bob or Robert or something, and then it was shortened to Bob, and that's why it was called the Bob ATM. Now I'm saying to you, and then the first heart transplant was done by the South African government under the Department of Health with Chris Barnard and the team that he worked with. We have, and he's now late. He was my best friend's dad, the first black golfer in Africa to win a global cup in 1976. Vincent Shabalala, Ubabu Vincent Shabalala, from Soweto, won the 1976 Open in France, right? So I'm saying to you, and I can go, and I've already indicated to you, our power stations were built exactly like the ones in the US. Same technology, probably similar companies of engineers that put them together, etc. So we had every, and I mean, there's so many other things. The creepy crawly, the creepy crawly that cleans your pool? It's a global product. It's a South African invention.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Yes,
there's
it
many.
is.
Let me tell you.
Did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Let
They
me
call it
tell
the
you.
Barracuda and whatever.
Barracuda,
Okay.
yeah,
Yes.
they've changed the name, but
Yeah.
that whole. So, and there are many. There are many inventions that have put us ahead of the game. Now, please, the victimhood and the race obsession, put that stuff aside. That stuff is not relevant. The representation, this proportional party representation, my foot. It deletes meritocracy. It deletes delivery. It deletes, a qualitative existence. You can forget about it. Because now you're politicizing things wrongly. There's nothing wrong with politics, by the way. But we all sort of have learned to abhor politics, to resent politics because of what it has turned out to become. And its manifestations are all these things that I'm mentioning. So, but when you're having a meritocratic discussion and you have black women, black women and black men coming together to solve black problems, right? Some will come and, say, oh, but our problems were not caused by us. Oh, no, there's no such a thing. There's no problem that you didn't cause. You know what I mean? You might not have caused it, but you certainly were part of it. And this problem happened over many years. The colonial project, we can argue about it until the cows come home, right? Starting from the slave trade. Somebody, oh yeah, but we were enslaved. No, but black men were selling slaves. Black men were selling slaves. The only people who really fought slavery very hard were women in Africa. And there's documented evidence to suggest this. You just go up here to Angola, just West Africa, but just above Namibia, Angola. The only monarch or leader in Angola who was able to stave off the Portuguese and the Dutch together was Nzinga. Nzinga's father failed because the onslaught was, I think he had a mental breakdown or whatever. I can't remember how historically it's recorded, but he collapsed when the Europeans came. And by the way, they didn't show up in Angola by accident. They had already been operating north to Angola. So, they were moving towards Angola southwards, right? Before they even arrived like South Africa. And he and her father died. And then her brother took over as the next king of Ndonga, because that's what Angola was called. And it was a much bigger region because, of course, we had borders in in Africa. This argument of a borderless Africa is a very apolitical and almost ignorant argument, because you can't say, I don't have a border, ngiyinkosi yendawo, ngiyinkosi yakuphi. How do you define my kingship, my queenship? through the rivers and the mountains and all the other natural structures that formed our borders. We just didn't have as many as we have now. We had about 30-something when the European colonizers came. Now we've got 50-something after the Berlin Conference in 1868. So her brother, Ndonga's brother, takes over from the father. He suffers a mental breakdown. The fight with the Dutch and the Portuguese is too much for him. And then Nzinga takes over. Nzinga, at the time when she's taking over, she's already the general of the army. Because that's what, by the way, one of the reasons that women struggle, it's not a divisive one. It's one that is likely to actually bring us all back together as African men and women, to be honest. Because women just by our nature, yes, bakhona abafazi abakhohlakele, bakhona abafazi abathakathayo, bakhona abafazi abakwazi ukubulala, but they are a very, very small minority in the women population group versus the number of men that can do all these horrific things amongst the male population. Women, we don't have an interest in governing for ourselves because God created us the weaker sex physically. Our physical muscles are weaker than the muscles of a man. Therefore, there's certain situations in society where you need a man to protect you. You need protection, physical protection, right? So we understand that, and we don't have an ego about it. We are very happy to say, no, I'm not as strong as a man my age. He's much stronger than me, probably 50% or more stronger than me. But I'm happy to allow him to be a man and do what he needs to do in this space, as long as he also allows me to be a woman and do what I need to do as a woman. And then when we come together, we do whatever the hell we want to do without putting this man-woman, thing as a blockage to say, no, umfazi, you can only do this. Nzinga was already a general in the army of Ndonga when her father was king, and I think mostly her brother. Because in Africa, an unmarried princess would automatically be the head of the army.
An unmarried princess?
Yes.
Okay.
A princess from royalty, because obviously, we're talking pre-colonial times. So our entire leadership structure was structured around inkosi, amakhosi, angithi.
Yeah.
And the rest, and the entire, what shall I call it? I wanted to say, but like the entire value chain of how our leadership was structured, right? So we were all led by monarchies, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And so women, as a demonstration of the fact that chauvinism, patriarchy, sexism, misogyny are all constructs of the modern contemporary times, of the colonial times. They are not African constructs. A woman had no role specifically allocated to her to say you cannot move out of this kitchen role. We didn't have kitchen roles. We did whatever the hell we wanted to do. If bofuna ukuyolima, largely beslima, of course. But if bofuna ukuyozingela, bozingela. If you wanted to be in the army, if you wanted to make blanket, whatever the hell you wanted to do, because ngesintu ongadli, ongasebenzi, agadli. There's nothing that says umfazi ongasebenza kadli indoda ongasebenzi. That shows you that we have a very our language, even our language does not distinguish gender, right? Therefore, the roles that we played were not genderized. Nzinga was the head of the army. There's many other queens that you can follow, Central, Northwest Africa, up to Ethiopia. A lot of credit is given by the Westerners to, what's his name in Ethiopia, that he staved off Alexander the Great. What's his name? I can never pronounce his name because it's a lie. Yes, he's there. Yes, he exists. But it's not him who staved off Alexander the so-called Great. It was Candace. It was Queen Candace. It was Queen Candace who staved off colonialism in Ethiopia. It was a woman. So everywhere in Africa, if you're looking for success stories, it was a woman. Come to South Africa. Charlotte Maxege in when did they do the union? 1910. 1912, the ANC formed, right? 1913, the Land Act was promulgated, right? 1913, later in that year, or 1914, Charlotte Maxege took women all the way to Free State to march against the past laws that were passed by the 1913 Land Act. Only a woman did that. Nobody else in this country can ever claim to have fought for land when it was not fashionable, when it was really rough, right at the birth of the colonial, imperialist, capitalist onslaught of 1910, 1913. The final division of South Africa to bring power to the European forces represented by the Dutch mainly, or the Afrikaners mainly, as they would then came to be known, and the British. So the point that I'm making is that you look at all of history from an African point of view, all of it.
So it was matriarchal.
Without a woman having her freedom fully, unfettered, uncoordinated by some men who sit somewhere and decide, no, umfazi akayenzi kanje. Because it's always men that tell us this. I've never heard a woman tell me, umfazi akayenzi kanje. Yes, of course, abomama bethu bebasitshela njalo. Intombazane njani? Because they were trained brutally. They were brought through a very brutal system of subjugation. You know, they were subjugated. They didn't realize it, but they were being subjugated through violence. Land dispossession was at its height in the 40s, 30s, 20s, and so on. And it came with a lot of violence. Christianization of African populations was very aggressive around the development of the capitalist sector, because, you know, capitalists, the globalists, wanted a coordinated society where they colonized. So there was a lot of brutality to Christianize you, to westernize you, to change you from whatever it is they wanted to change. So our mothers, yes, did say those things to us. No, mfazi akayenzi ukuthi, but I understood why. They had a reason. They were subjugated. They were bullied. They were abused. They were beaten, literally, into submission. Right? They were given unequal status, more unequal status than black men. They couldn't do this. They couldn't do. Bebasuswe emasimini. Mina ugogo wami bekalima. Ngikhulile emasimini mina. Ngila abantwana laba I was always on my grandmother's back. Makase emasimini until I could walk, and then I was raised esimini. So I understand indigenous Africanness from practical upbringing, right? And so I understand when women do that, but it's only truly, genuinely, if we come back to today and we redefine ourselves, or we want to redefine ourselves, and we want to set a new path for ourselves, and we want to rebuild this country, genuinely rebuild this country.
So Africa's leadership in history, historically, was matriarchal? Is that true?
No, not through all ages, of course. Because matriarchy itself, I mean, I'm not very well versed on when matriarchy kicked in, but matriarchy itself, you know, the fact that you have matriarchy means that you have patriarchy as well. So matriarchy itself was an era that we lived through. It wasn't like eternal. We were not eternally like that. There were times when men were dominant. We constantly interchange.
Yes, there's waves.
We constantly interchange. The whole of society, by the way, even in Europe, the same happened. Europe, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, went through their... So European patriarchy, when it started taking over and started becoming dominant in Europe, right, was the time when they were colonizing Africa, when they had a more coordinated effort, when it was just beyond colonizing the northern regions that were easily accessible to Europe and the Middle East and the East. But the patriarchy in Europe itself also rose and reached its climax, or it's probably still going to reach its climax, I don't know, or it was already reached its climax, around the time when Europe decided that they needed and wanted resources in Africa, and so they needed to come and colonize. And that's when matriarchy in Africa also started to... Because if you follow the timelines, it's very easy. You look at each region in Africa and you follow the timelines of their resistance. There were wars of resistance against the Western or European colonial onslaught, because of course there was the Arabic one and then the Roman one, which was defeated by Queen Candace in Ethiopia. But if you look at our rise of patriarchy, and of course rise of patriarchy, and I don't mean that in a positive way, and the demise of Africa, it sort of corresponds with the time of colonization, but also the rise of patriarchy in Europe, where men were asserting themselves as well in Europe, and they were deliberately going out of their way to subjugate women, right? And I have a firm belief, I've not seen this written anywhere, but I have a firm belief that the reason European men in the, say, from the 1400s or 1300s coming up, then started, took a decision to say, when they go into all territories, they will have a specific, program to destroy, relations in that community, and specifically, particularly bring greater disharmony between men and women. In Africa was primarily because they saw how productive Africa was, how peaceful Africa was, how nurturing Africa was, how just love-filled Africa was. And I'm not romanticizing it, it's a fact. Under the leadership of largely women, especially the successes of the African armies that were either led by women, and that's not to say there were no men in the armies, but the leadership of the army were women. The onslaught of colonialism started becoming greater when women were removed from their roles, specifically the military roles, the African princesses who were leading armies for their kingdoms or queendoms. That's when the onslaught of colonialism started increasing. When European men started realizing that, oh, okay, so these women here are still, like equally respected. They have so much power and influence, which they are not abusing, right? Because I'll pay you if you can show me an African female queen who committed genocides, who presided over rapes, who presided over colonizing another territory. It's only when men came in that all these dysfunctionalities started, right? And so I think that European men saw this thing and they were like, okay, we need to deal with the women. We need to subjugate the women even stronger. We need to rape them. We need to remove them from their positions of power. We need to emphasize their physical weakness. We need to emphasize their physical weakness to their men in order to create the division between them. Because the minute you say to a man, "Uyindoda wena," there's something evukayo phakathi. Beyilalele nje. Kodwa wena uyindoda.
Uyindoda akwazi ukuhlula umfazi. There's also that thing. Good uyindoda akwazi ukuhlula umfazi. Whereas, I mean, that is not true. We all have different strengths,
right?
If you've mentioned.
But with the human ego,
yes,
once it takes over, which is what is governing our country today.
Governing our country today, which political party would you say has got the best laws that would best represent women?
I can't think of anyone because I think maybe because of how radical my views are. I think talking to different women, if you can talk to a woman from a different setting, she might have a party that she feels represents women. I've been there. None of those people represent women. None of them. From my perspective, if my opinion is worth anything, they don't. They patronize women. That's different. They actually hate women. They literally hate women. I think the political party space is very violent towards women. It's very aggressive towards women. It's deliberately suppressive. It's not an environment that is naturally nurturing for women. It's not. I'm telling you from my own experience. And often people will say to me, why do you say that? We think that you were thriving. No, I was not thriving. You looked at me and you saw thriving, because thriving for you means whatever it means. I was not thriving. I was just working hard all the time. I was stressed out all the time. I was constantly having to defend myself, protect myself, while fighting for other people, right? While pushing, for people that were suffering as much as I was.
So what do we say to the woman voter, especially the young woman voters who are going to the polls? What is your advice to them?
Forget about voting based on representation. Yeah, for me, representation is going to lead us to a deeper hole than we are in. Vote for whoever you feel. I mean, we're all different ages with different experience, with different knowledge, with different perspectives. I cannot impose my political view on somebody else.
I get you.
Right? I really, really can't. I can't say to somebody, vote for this person or that person. I know who I'm voting for from the independents. Yeah. But if you really feel, and you're being honest with yourself,
Yeah.
and you feel like there's a party that I believe at least 7 out of the 10 priorities that I have in my life, or 6 out of at least a simple majority of the priorities that I have for my life, could actually do well in that space. I only have a problem with this, that, and the other. We'll fix it after elections, engage with them, take them to court if we have to, or write them letters or whatever, influence their policy perspective. But in reality, I put representation aside. Maybe I have 2-3 parties, but because I understand the system so well, I almost can't differentiate the parties.
So you're voting for an independent
I'm voting for an individual.
or individual?
Because me, namangik votela, you're going to have to account to me. None of these people that are in parties can account to us. They don't account to you. And you know why? That's because they do not account to you. They actually literally account elsewhere. We were talking about the Bella Bill the other day. We were in another discussion. And that's just an example. The Bella Bill is just one simple, very minute example. There are many. The laws that you pass in your parliaments, I don't know if you know the bylaws. Do you know the bylaws?
Not all.
Do you know what bylaws are?
I do. The reason why the Metro Police exist is to enforce bylaws.
Yes.
Exactly.
Primarily.
Yes.
The reason why the SAPS exists is to enforce what? Acts of
Yes.
Parliament.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because the Metro Police have the same status as the SAPS.
Yes.
In
but
reality.
But they look after the metro, but they need to pass bylaws. Things like your swimming pool has to be covered so that your kids don't drown, and a whole lot of others.
So you tell me, if you drive along, let's say Malibongo Drive, all of Malibongo Drive, and there's never electricity, so your security, there's a road I had an accident on a few weeks ago in Soweto, Maudlula ngase, not
Old
Pimville.
Potch?
No, not Old Potch, the other one on the other side, Meadowlands.
Yeah.
That road has not had electricity, and I'm not talking about the traffic lights. I'm talking about the entire street lights. A long stretch of that road has not had electricity for a long time. So I had an accident at a point because I didn't see the traffic light at all. Not even the person driving next to me could see it. So my thing is, if you have a priority, and I'm going back to your question about how to vote, who to vote for, how to decide. Sorry, Lelo, I'll come back
No
to you.
problem.
If you feel that, if you're happy, bylaws, if you're happy with how the Metro Police have upheld the bylaws and made sure that they are respected so that we have a livable environment in the metro, and under the stewardship of Party 1, 2, 3, 4, because now there's some sort of coalition arrangement, then by all means vote for one of those guys. For me, it's a rational decision. It's not an emotional decision for me. It's not emotional. It's not about representation. I don't care. They could even have a woman there. But if that woman doesn't resonate with my value systems in relation to government and what I think government should do and should not do, I'm not going to vote for her, because I'm not voting for your gender and your genitalia. I don't care what gender you are. It actually doesn't really even matter to me anymore that there are 500 men and 10 women anymore. Because where has that representation brought us? People must vote for whoever they feel will account to them. I cannot. Angwazi ukuvotela umuntu who does not account, who's not accountable, who's not accessible. I have to be accountable as an individual. I have to account to every part of society. Why must I account? It even gets to the point where, as a citizen, you have a right to ask, why must I obey or abide by any law, including tax, which is an offense that can have you jailed if you don't comply with tax laws, right? Paying tax, even the Constitution, they've guaranteed it in the Constitution. So if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to serve time in jail. Why must I continue paying tax? When Malibongwe, for instance, and I'm giving you a simple example, has not had electricity for years. This morning when I was driving here, I saw the traffic lights working. I was shocked. I almost, you just stop at the traffic light. The traffic light was green, and I stopped because I'm not used to it.
Man, we can go on the whole day, and I wanted to. There's so much to talk about. I know on this conversation we ended up talking what we spoke about, but it's a beautiful and interesting conversation to speak about women's issues, right?
Yeah.
And I like getting schooled, and I got schooled. I learned.
I got a lot of schooling today. It also explains, this movie Black Panther, and you see there's a lot of women who are in the armies and stuff, and you think maybe they're making that up. But it's not. By what I've been hearing, it's not made up. It's a reality. It's part of history that that we need to learn and understand just how women are important, how their importance, their greater importance in history and in current society, and their strengths as well.
Last words for our Radio 2000 listeners.
Look, I mean, do your best, guys. Vote for whoever the hell you vote for, but make sure that after you voted for that party or that individual, that they will be accessible and they will account to you and that they will represent you and that they will pass laws that actually advance your interests in society versus advancing the interests of some globalist entities that we don't know.
You spoke about spoiled ballots.
Spoiled ballot. If you have nobody to vote for, definitely spoil your ballot, but don't sit at home.
What does that do? What does that do compared to sitting at home?
Yeah, well, so one, you have to vote because you're a citizen. You must be part of South Africa, you know. You must have your voice heard. But also it contributes towards the number of total votes because you become a person who has turned up, who took a ballot and who voted. And so it affects the proportionality. So when fewer people, so if you get 5 out of 10, what's the percentage? Versus if you get 5 out of 15.
Okay, I get
right? So it's like standard 3 mathematics.
Yeah.
Okay. The only disappointment for me is that they did not separate, which is what we intended to achieve, is that they must separate the individuals who contest as individuals and not classify. But we'll talk about that next time. There's a reason why they call them independents. They are making the independents contest the political parties. A huge inequality that should never have been allowed. And the Concord in the last ruling around, I think when Abu Musi went back to the Concord, we didn't go back as New Nation Movement. I mean, it's a struggle that we've opened up for all South Africans. Whoever wants to carry on that work after the initial judgment is more than welcome. I mean, we're building our country together for all of us, for posterity. We won't be here in 100 years' time, and so we're not doing it for ourselves. But when they went to court to fight the continuing unconstitutionality of the Electoral Act, they were told by, I don't know which judge in those benches of the Concord that there are no more inequalities. We have now removed all possibilities of inequalities, which could technically be right, but the IEC, of course, play their usual games because, of course, they take their instructions from their masters. They don't take their instructions from the citizens. They then went ahead and allowed this inequality where individuals and political parties are literally contesting each other. That's unequal. That's not fair. But still, I would encourage as many people. I think we have 12 or 14 independents nationally.
I don't know how many we have.
And in Gauteng, we have what? I don't know if it's 2 or 6.
I don't know how many we have.
So all I would really like to appeal is that let's give those independent candidates a chance. When you take your ballot, ask the party, the party agents and whoever else is helping, the IEC officers, ask them to help you. You know, if the ballot, because apparently the ballot paper is going to be very long, ask them to show you where are the names of the individuals. You know, because they're not representing any organization or any body, any church, any association, any party. They're representing your interests, and you will be able to get things done through them much quicker. I was very accessible when I was a public representative. Anybody could call me and say, I have a problem. I would sit down, look at their problem, and look at it objectively so that they're not lying or misleading. And then I would engage the relevant department, ask them the questions, push them until they resolved that problem if it needed resolving. But I was also very educational. I would educate citizens, say, but what have you done? What have you done? So get an independent where you can. Vote for an individual, because that person's phone number will have to be on the website of Parliament or the legislature. They'll have to have a public number. They'll have to have an email address. When you call them, they'll have to be physically available for you. When there's a vote in Parliament, which is the power of individuals, when there's a vote in Parliament for a budget or a decision or a law or whatever vote, you have the right to call them and say, I want you to vote this way. I voted for you. I'm your constituency. I want you to vote this way. I want you to vote against this bill. So that when they go to Parliament, they are literally carrying a mandate.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mandisa Mashego.